The first thing I'm going to do is follow this tutorial here, which is continuous delivery, which I'll throw into this chat in case you didn't see it. And I'm mostly going to follow it, although I'm going to probably make it a little bit more streamlined so that there's a couple steps that will be, I think, a little bit easier, especially in terms of source control. I think the source control demo, the way I did it last year, was a little bit harder than it needed to be. So the first thing I'm going to do, which I think is a good pattern for anything you're doing with AWS, is to use Cloud9. If you've already set up Cloud9 yourself and have GitHub keys created, you're pretty much good to go. You don't have to copy what I'm about to do, but just so you can see it again, this would be only, again, the first time you set up Cloud9. We're going to go through and just create the SSH keys so that it has a linkage to a GitHub repository. So I'll go through here and I'll say Hugo for Duke, and we'll put, I don't know, 10.7. This is a temporary environment for building Hugo websites. Okay, we'll go ahead and do this. I'm just going to leave everything default, keep it simple, and create this environment. While that's being created, I'm going to also simultaneously go to GitHub and I'm going to create a new repo specifically for this web application. And we'll go here and we'll call this Hugo for Duke 1.7. And this is a sample Hugo website for Duke class. There we go. Maybe even make this a little bit bigger. And we'll add a README file and a git ignore. Now, I'm going to show you something with this git ignore that's going to be actually a very subtle but important thing. And just so just keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. Okay, so I created an empty repo, and then this should be almost ready. It should just take a second for this thing to wake up. While this is waking up, and before I set up the keys, one thing I'll bring up about this thing that we're going to show, and just I'll do very, very limited theoretical. I'm just going to do mostly practical, but I did want to just call this out explicitly, is that we're going to be using IaaS to do this, and we're going to be building, we're going to use serverless at the same time. So Hugo will be running inside of an S3 bucket, and that's infrastructure as a service. It's object storage, and object storage, the nice thing about it is that it has 11 nines reliability. So this means it's essentially will never go down. We're talking milliseconds per year. And the serverless built on top, what that means is that AWS has an offering that allow us to host websites that are globally scalable. Essentially, it could be, again, like Wall Street Journal, New York Times level, just with this thing I'm about to show you. So really, serverless is a way of I guess, making a higher level abstraction on top of infrastructure as a service. But really the heavy lifting here is just this S3 bucket. Okay, so this thing woke up, and what I'm going to do first here is create the SSH keys. Again, one more time, I'll bring this up. You only have to do this the first time you create Cloud9. If you've already created one of these, don't worry about this. But I'll go through here and say SSH keys, make them. So SSH keygen -t RSA. Press return, I think 5 times, and then print this out, this public key. So this is the public portion of an SSH key, which is the part that you can share with anybody. I could put this on a website and it wouldn't matter. And I'm going to go to the icon where my profile is, and then go to SSH and GPG keys. So pretty straightforward process to put your keys in. We'll just say Hugo keys. There we go. And we'll confirm this. So once I've got that set up, then I'm going to go back to that repo that I created and check it out locally. so that we've got this thing ready to go. So Hugo for Duke, I'll click on this. And this, what I just showed you, is probably going to be very common for many things that you would work on from the very beginning, or if you're first starting at a company, this would be what I would recommend, doing something like this. So now we've got the GitHub local. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to download a copy of this Hugo binary, and we can go to Hugo. Let me just get the link to it. They have a copy of this right here. I'm just going to copy this link, and I'll just throw this in there. And inside of GitHub, they show you the latest releases here. And this one looks like it was released 9 hours ago, which hopefully is still, there isn't some big problem with it. That's one thing that's always a little bit spooky is there going to be a problem with, if you're using a bleeding edge version. So I'm going to actually go to the Linux 64-bit tar file right here. I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to say copy link address. That looks like that should work. And then I'm going to just curl that, or wget it, either one. So we'll say wget. And what the wget command does is, this is like if you go to a website and you click a link that downloads something, wget is just a command line version of it. So it's a very handy tool to be aware of if you haven't used it before. So we do this, and it puts it locally. Now, once it's in my local system here, I can uncompress this tar.gz file. And this is also a command that comes up all the time. And I've used it for probably 2 decades. And it's almost like memory now, is that when you see a file that's a tar and a gz, what that means is that it's basically like a folder full of files that are also zipped together and compressed. And so it's a very common standard for Linux software. And if you run tar space zxvf, it's the flags that you would use to like verbosely dump out the contents of that compressed file. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just like this, and then this should uncompress locally. There we go. Now, I think I said last time that we would put this into the ~bin directory. And so the reasoning behind this is so that it will show up in our path and just makes things a little bit easier to deal with. So I'm going to actually do that. I'm going to say make dir-p ~bin. This is not necessarily strictly necessary for us to use Hugo. It's just convenient to put things in your path so that I don't have to worry about where the Hugo binary is. So I'm going to go ahead and make this directory using that command, make dir-p. And if you're not familiar with make dir-p, what it does is it not only makes the directory, but it actually does it in a way where I think it's idempotent, if I remember correctly, is that you can run it over and over and over again. And if the directory exists, it just won't do anything. So it's kind of a nice way to create a directory. And then I'm going to move this Hugo file here into the ~bin directory. Let's see here, bin, move it into there. Okay, so now if I type in which Hugo, it should show me it's in my user's bin directory, which is a good place to put your binaries. And if I type in Hugo, unable to load, so it looks like it's good to go. So if later somebody had problems doing what I just did, I'll help you in office hours. Don't worry too much about it. So now that I've got Hugo running, the next step here would be to create basically a local website in Hugo. And the way that you do that is that you run this thing called Hugo new site Hugo new site Quickstart. Hugo new site Quickstart. So Hugo new site, and we'll call this Quickstart like that. There we go. And it says, great, you created this new website. And then it tells you what it is you would need to do, which is to add some styling. So like fancy JavaScript and all kinds of things like that. I would need to do this other stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to move this. If I remember it correctly, this is probably the right way to do this, is I'm going to move this directory into the project that I just checked out, the source control project. And the reason I'm going to do this is so that this is actually what I want to keep in source control, because the raw template is actually the stuff that later I'm going to build programmatically and build HTML files from. So that looks like that would be good to get this in here. And then now that I can go inside of this directory, if we type in git status, you'll notice that now Git knows that this has not been versioned. And so one of the things that I'm going to do here is that I'm going to move all of the stuff that's in Quickstart into my current working directory. And the reason for this is so that it's at the root of the source control, because we want just basically this directory that has flat and has all these files in there. And now I can actually just remove this directory Quickstart, right? Because basically what it'll look like now is that, well, it should look like that. That's weird. Did I just screw something up? Oh, I must have moved it up too high. So I can just do it again. I can just remove. Actually, to make it simple here, I'm going to move. I'm going to do this one more time. This is the stuff that gets a little bit, it's easy to make mistakes. I make a mistake on do this, is that I basically what I want to do is create a scaffolding and then dump these files inside of the source control. So I'm gonna make it one more time, and then I'm gonna cd into Quickstart here, and I'm going to cp everything recursively, and I'm gonna just be explicit here. I'm gonna say put all the files inside of here into up one directory into the Hugo for Duke. Now let me change into that directory and just see here if this works. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it's easy to make mistakes on the shell and then you have extra files somewhere. So now if I type in git status, we should see, okay, great, I've got this stuff inside of here. So the next thing I can do is I can follow what it says in the tutorial that I gave you a link to, which is I'm going to type in git submodule add. And so what this will do is it will give it a basically links to another Git repo that has one section of a Git repo. So I have my main source control, and then I have a linked folder that will be linked to a different repo. So I can just go ahead and do this, which is git submodule add, and then run this. There we go. That looks like that works. And then the next thing that I'll do is that I will go through here and paste this out into a config file. So the main, smarts of Hugo here live inside of this config file. And so this config file, there's not a lot going on, and I can just paste this in there. And then if I look back here, it should. If I open this back up again, let me just double check why that doesn't show up. Config, echo theme. Let's see here. So this guy doesn't need to exist anymore. We can get rid of this. And then this one, we should just be able to put in theme. I don't know why that command is not working, echo theme. But basically, I'm going to put inside of here theme and put in the name of the theme. So theme is equal to ANAKE. There we go. But so this is essentially the majority of the way this thing is controlled. And I also can just get rid of some other stuff in here. So I don't need this. That looks like I can get rid of that. Now, that is weird. Why do I have two of these inside of here? Is that what I screwed up? I might have done something weird, which is, I don't know why it shows Hugo for Duke. Oh, because I'm tripping myself up. That I think is the name of the folder here, but I don't know why it's showing another. Oh, it's because I created these when I copied the when I copied the folder originally. I accidentally put this data up here, so we don't want that. We can just get rid of all this stuff. That's the problem. That's what was confusing me. Okay, so we just have this thing, and then if I look inside of here, that looks good. Okay, great. And if I type in get status, I can actually add in the rest of the stuff. So add this, git add config as well, config. So the piece that is a little bit tricky that I was telling you about is in this git modules section here. That, I'm sorry, not the git modules section, the git ignore section is, if we did go here, we should have a git ignore. Let's see, git status. Why do I not have a git ignore here? Let me first just check this in. Adding Hugo. Now notice that it's going to ask me to put some information here inside. We'll say this, and then I'll update this as well. Do this. Okay. And then we'll reset this. Okay, write this out, and then exits. Perfect. So if I push this, let's just double check that all this is inside of there. And what have we got? We got this. Yeah, I thought I'd added a git ignore, but maybe I forgot to click the button for it. But basically the point that I was going to mention is that, I'm just going to make one real quick, touch.getIgnore, is that getIgnore, is that with the getIgnore, what's important is to ignore the public directory. And the public directory will be where we're going to generate assets. So these assets will actually generate a bunch of HTML files. And I don't want to check those in because I'm going to be changing them constantly when I make my project. And so I want to put basically git ignore the public directory. So if I go through here and I say git status, I can add .git ignore. So little bit trickier than I wanted to show it, but it looks like we're good to go. Adding git ignore. So as you can see, the command line, some of the downsides is that it's super powerful and it's easy to tweak things. So Hugo is, you can run a command where it'll create a post. So I'm going to go ahead and run this command, which is new post. And then if I go to the content here, you can say, here's my first post. I can actually say, basically draft false and say, I created this today, 10/7, and it's just literally a markdown file, and just, this is a markdown. So once I've done this, then you can run this, actually, there's two ways to look at data with Hugo. You can either run it in foreground mode so that it shows you a Hugo service, like a Hugo web service. Or what you can do is you can also do Hugo as a statically generated asset. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do is that I will run it in foreground mode. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to AWS here, and I'm going to show you how I can open up the correct ports so that I can see port 8080 running. So if we go through here and I log back in, I'm going to find my instance here, which is EC2. And inside this running instance, you should see cloud. We should see AWS Cloud9 environment. EC2 dashboard, running instance. There we go. That's the one I want. So I'm going to click on this one, and all I need to do is go to security here, and notice that it has this security group like this. Is I can just tweak these roles, the rules, to allow me to get access to port 8080. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to say I want the inbound rules to have another rule, and this other rule would be port 8080. So I'm going to say source everybody in the whole world, and then the port range, so that's source type, the port range would be port 8080. And I can put a description and say, this is to preview Hugo. All right, so we'll go ahead and add that rule. And then now that I've got that running, I can go back here and I can type in Hugo serve. But first, what I will do here is just type this command like this, which will show me what the IP address is, so that I can also put this, I believe, in the config file. Or I can tell Hugo when I bind it, basically what is my IP address. So I'm gonna run this command that's in the document that I shared earlier, and I can go and put this IP address in there. So there we go. Go here, paste this in, and then go do that. And it looks like it's running, which is great. And if I click on this, I can actually just copy this and put this in another tab here. Go like this. And hopefully this works. It'd be a bummer if this thing is not demoing, which it looks like it's hanging, which I'm not sure why that's hanging. Am I doing 3? Maybe I need to do explicitly HTTP. So let's see. Not sure why this one is not Hugo serve bind port 8080. Well, it's not that critical that it's running locally, because we can work around this, but that is strange here, because I have port 8080. Anybody in the world can access it. And then if I go back to EC2, it's this instance. So not sure why this thing is not giving me the ability to curl it. I'm going to try to curl it from my house real quick and just see if I can get access to it. But basically, go here and do that. But yeah, I don't know why this thing. This is the least important part, which is that you can preview it earlier. But what the other thing you can do is you can type in Hugo, and Hugo will just generate a bunch of HTML files like that. And notice how it said it generated 10 pages. Now, what did it do? Is it created a public directory, right? And so this public directory has all of my HTML assets. And if you look at the time, if I time this, for example, this will actually, it took 88 milliseconds and it generated 10 HTML pages. So it's ridiculously fast. So this is why you could build, a huge news site, for example, using something like Hugo. And really the next step here would be, how do we get this stuff and move it over to an S3 bucket so we can serve it out? You can serve out Hugo with that web service. Like, I don't know why the ports weren't opening up, but you could just put it on a server like an EC2 instance. The downside to that is that what if it goes down? There's problems. So that's why serverless is so powerful, is that I can just copy it over. So what I'm going to do next here is I'm just going to copy it over. I'm going to create a new bucket, and I'm going to literally just copy the data over myself manually by just doing like a copy in S3 here. So I'm going to go over to S3 real quick and go to this thing and make a new bucket. We'll call this bucket, Hugo Duke or something. Hugo Duke, unless I already used that earlier. Okay, that looks good. We'll just say next, next, next. Oh, you have more buckets than allowed. Boy, I have a constant problem with that. I'm going to delete this. And it says delete the bucket. Oh, the name of the bucket. Okay, there we go. This is what happens when you're working on AWS for years, is you have too many buckets. Okay, Hugo Duke. Here's our bucket. And we'll go ahead and create this. And I think that the main gist of this is that I'm going to go to this bucket, and I'm going to go to properties, if I remember, and click on static website hosting. And so this is literally a serverless technology, and all you need to do is just click this button. And then now you've got the ability to run websites that have, again, 11.9's reliability. It gives you a couple things to put in here, for options. So I'll type in HTML. Sure, we can say error.html. These would be the root file. And then I can say save. And once I do that, the only other thing I need to do is I want to create a bucket policy that will allow anybody to actually read data out of this. And so I'll need to go to, I believe it's under permissions, under bucket policy. And you would just go in here and just say what you want it to do. This is actually pretty intuitive. It says every single thing inside, let people look at it, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. Because I need to put the actual name. I need to type in the word Hugo Duke. There we go. So this would have to be the name of your actual bucket. There we go. Access denied. Bucket error to add a new Hugo Duke. That's definitely interesting why it's asking me to. The block public access setting turn on for this bucket prevents generating public access. Maybe they changed something. They might have done something differently than the way I did it last year. They're always making things a little bit more secure, but it looks like you have to edit public access to say yes. Then do this, then paste this in, and then I can type in Hugo Duke. So this is the part that's kind of irritating about cloud computing, is this kind of tweaking things like this. There we go. Okay, save. It looks like it's good. So in theory, I could actually just, I believe, even go to this Hugo section, this public directory, and literally just, in fact, let me just try this. I'll just download it. I'll just download this whole directory to my desktop, just to show you in theory how simple this is. And then I'm going to go back to this bucket and just dump the files in there. So you can see it's kind of a simple process to create a website. So we go here and I just throw this in there. I just dump it in there. Sure, I'll dump it in and just say next, next, next. And now that looks like it was pretty quick. If I go to properties, I think it has the link here. There we go. Right. So it's pretty awesome. How I mean, I made a couple mistakes typing in commands, whatever, but the gist of this is that this is actually a professional scale website. It's up, it's running. It's a battle tank. It'll never go down. Now, the part that's actually going to make it way more useful is that I never need to do anything to make changes. I can actually it automatically will do what I just did myself manually. So how do we do this? So what we can do is actually create AWS CloudBuild. And what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to go to CloudBuild, and we talked about this last week, is that CloudBuild essentially just runs commands for me. And so I'm going to create a new deployment that will make so that anytime I make a change into GitHub, it'll just programmatically deploy this. Now, here's actually my own personal website. You can see that I actually have a link to it that it deploys this project. All it needs to look like is something like this, right? Where I basically go through here and download the version of Hugo, do basically this. This actually also highlights why the robot is better than human. I, in theory, know how to do this. I've been doing this for years, and I'm messing up all these commands, doing all kinds of screwed up things. But the robot doesn't mess up because it tells you've told it exactly what to do, and it's going to generate a new Hugo website and then sync it over to S3. And the way it does that is with this command. Just like that's essentially there's two things that make the website. One is this, which is the Hugo command itself runs, which generates all those files, and then this one syncs it. That's it. There's literally just two steps to make it. But I want to programmatically do this every time I make changes. So I'm going to build the same thing for this website. So I'll go through here and say create build project, and we'll call this Duke Hugo again. Duke Hugo. And sure, let's do all this stuff. Duke Hugo, continuous deploy or delivery. And then for the source here, there's not only the option for GitHub, but I think we talked about this last week, is there's a lot of different kinds of source control providers. GitHub happens to be the most popular, but Code Commit is essentially the Amazon version of GitHub. And so if you are working somewhere that's 100% AWS, this might be something that you would use, but we're going to select GitHub, and it's a public repo. So we'll kind of wait for this thing to connect. I believe I've already set this up previously. That's why it knows how to get access to it. And I can just put in this URL like that. So I'm going to go back to this and just go to code, click on HTTP, and just copy this. And I'm trying to remember if it says what's the advantage of public versus private. Or I think I need to do, this one's easier, I think, is that it can automatically find it for you. So Duke Hugo, there we go, that one. And then for the source version, this would again go into some of the stuff we talked about last week, which was, let's say you actually were hired by somebody. Actually, I used to do some consulting a few years ago for this really big golf company. And I actually set this exact things up, and I created a master branch, a staging branch, and a production branch. So the people inside the company could be making changes and testing out ideas in the development branch, and it would auto deploy, and no one in the public got to see it. But then when they're ready to go, they would just merge into the other branch. So this, you could do a similar thing here as well, which is you could have multiple buckets. So you'd have a dev bucket in S3, a production bucket. In this case, we're going to just keep it at the root, so I don't need to change anything. Now, keep in mind that because I told it to link to the submodule, which is where it gets the theme, is that I want it to be able to pull in that submodule. So I'll go ahead and say yes. And then I think we can leave everything here. Now, this is an important step here, which is a continuous delivery, continuous deployment concept, is every time I push a change, do this thing. And so we do want that. We want to click this. And then from here, I can go through here and say, do I want to have a custom image, a Docker image, so I could do all kinds of custom things in Docker, or do I just want the basics? We're going to go with the basics because Cloud9 is really where I developed this. So I'm going to get essentially a Cloud9 environment. So we'll just say standard. And for an image, I'll just use Amazon Linux 2, code build, Amazon Linux, x86. That looks good. And then environment again would be Linux. By the way, you could do even GPUs, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. You could train some models automatically. And this is optional, whether you want to allow it to have advanced privileges. Just in case something goes wrong, I'm going to enable this so that I don't screw things up. And then here's the part that will probably really trip a lot of people up whenever you're setting up a cloud native build server, is that you have to tell the service that it has the permissions to do this. And you can either create a new service role or use an existing one. It's more likely that I would recommend you create your own service role in the IAM section so that you explicitly know what you're telling this build server to do. In this case, I've already created one. In the past, we can just use one of these ones. Let's say Hugo service. That probably is. There's a reason I set that one up. I'm sure that one will work. And then it gives me the two options. Now we're in the final part of this, which is how do I tell it what to do? I can either tell it. I can literally just put commands in, which is actually an interesting option. Or I can use the YAML file. I think the YAML file is a little better because it's super simple and repeatable, and you can look at it inside of GitHub. So I'm going to say use buildspec.yaml, and then I believe that is really all I need to do is I can say create build project. So how do I get this to deploy now? That's the million-dollar question. So I'm going to go back to my Cloud9 environment, and I'm going to create a file called buildspec.yaml. So again, we'll say get status. Notice that this public directory, I'm not sure why it's not ignoring that. I told it to ignore it in git ignore, but don't know why that didn't save. Maybe I forgot to save it or something. But basically, if I type in git status now, yeah, you don't want to check in the public directory. You only want to check in the content. So I'll say git add content. And then I'll also say git add git ignore. And then I'm going to touch this buildspec.yaml file. I'm going to copy what I have in my other project, which is this thing. So it's called buildspec.yml. So I'm going to make the same thing. I'm just going to say YML. And then if I double click on this, I'm going to copy one that I used earlier for my own project, which is this. So I just go with here, just kind of tweak this a little bit. Okay, buildspec.yaml. There you go. Let's copy this, throw this into there. And all I need to do is tweak it a little bit. So one would be which version of Hugo. Well, why don't I just do the same version of Hugo? Keep mine. One of them would be that I will make the same version. So if I type in Hugo version, let's just make it have the same version. So this one is 0.762. Sure, that works, just like that. And then from here, this would just basically tell the build server to download that Hugo binary. And then the next step would be always delete the public directory just in case it happened to be there by accident. And the reason why I do this is that you want it to be essentially idempotent. So it will always start in a new environment and there'll be no cruft left over. And so this doesn't hurt anything if it doesn't exist. It'll just be silent. Then I run the Hugo command, which generates the files. and then I sync it into there. So the only thing I need to change is I need to change it to the bucket that's the new bucket that I had before, which I can just find real quick here, which is, I think it's called Hugo Duke. There we go. There's my bucket. So I will go back here and just change this to be Hugo Duke, just like that. By the way, I could even test this out locally by just running the command. If the build server has a problem, that's how I'll debug it. I'll just literally just run this command inside of Cloud9. But I hopefully this will just work. So let's go ahead and say get status and say, again, I'll add the get ignore, at get ignore, and I'll also add the build spec. Okay, finishing CD pipeline. And let's push it. So when I push this, if I go back to CloudBuild, it should automatically trigger. And so there we go. It's starting to trigger, which is awesome. And I can actually just look at the build process, which is pretty cool. I can just click on tail logs and we can just see it doing its magic. This is yet another reason why automation is so helpful. Is you saw me, in theory, I'm an expert at cloud computing, and I totally screwed up everything in the beginning. I'm just mangling this and that, but how do you even know what I did? It's you don't know what I did because you don't get to look at what the logs are. But with a build server, you literally can look at every single thing that it does, and it's telling us. It says first thing that it does is it enters the build server. It makes the assets. It syncs the files to the disk. Right. I can actually, let's just look at the whole thing in general. So it goes through here, finds the build spec YAML in GitHub. Then it runs Docker. Then what it does is it runs the build command, which downloads the Hugo binary. Once it downloads the Hugo binary, it uncompresses it, which is this, or it downloads it and then uncompresses it. And then finally, it will move the Hugo binary into the directory. It will remove what was in temp directory. It will remove the public directory, and then it runs the Hugo command. Again, this is really the only thing that's major. And look, it created 10 files, which is correct, and then it syncs the files. So I can easily debug exactly what happened. Now, if I go back to this bucket again, to this Hugo website, nothing will have changed because I didn't do anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back now to this website, and I'll show you. I can either make the change inside of the Cloud9 environment, or what's great about Hugo, and in fact about all continuous delivery pipelines, is that I can actually make the changes right in GitHub, and it'll just dynamically make the modification. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say, just tweak this and just say, okay, I created this. This is some markdown. I am testing CD with AWS CloudBuild. And this should deploy very, very quickly. So we'll go here, we'll say commit, go back again to our build server, and it should wake back up again. And we'll go to Hugo, and there it is. Now we're running build 2. We run build 2. Again, this should be pretty quick. We can just tail the log files. And one of the things that you do have to be careful of with the these kind of build processes here is that you can get confused if you don't look at the results sometimes in an incognito browser. It can cache the results, which is a little bit irritating. There we go, super fast, right? It just syncs the files over. The sync command only does deltas, so that's why I can copy so quick. So I think it's complete, right? Because it just did that. And if I go back here, if we refresh it, in theory, woo. There we go. I'm testing with AWS CloudBuild, right? So we can see changes. So